NASCAR is a very competitive environment. Their teams spending millions of dollars to eke out the smallest advantage over their competitors. Oftentimes races are decided by hundredths of a second, and they look for whatever advantage they can get.
All of that technology that pours into putting cars on the track, as the sanctioning body, we've got to officiate all of that. Today, we're using technology to better plan, run, and analyze our events from start to finish, and it's given us insights like we've never had before.
It's such a complicated logistical effort. Just envision the Super Bowl, but 38 weekends a year. Our partnership with Microsoft has been a huge win for NASCAR. It's been completely transformational, and we can just really focus on making great racing that our fans are excited to watch.
All right, it is Friday, August 2nd, and NASCAR kind of gotten jazzed up there. I don't know why.
A little got your adrenaline going?
It did. Emily's like, what do you want to do for our producer? She's like, what do you want to do for Open? Want to do NASCAR? I'm like, we haven't done NASCAR in a while. I'm like, yeah, racing.
Car go fast.
Car go fast. You know how much I do love that. That's when we go out for comps or something somewhere, some people go golfing. I will find the place that lets me rent cars and drive them quickly. But nobody cares about that really. What they do care about is that it's Office Flash Friday. I got a smattering of stuff, Skype end of life. Some interesting Skype for Business Online Office 365 service component announced end of life. Nothing to do with Skype Consumer. I even put that in the note. So do not say Doug said Skype.
No scares, right?
Skype for Business Online, not server, not any of that kind of stuff. And then just a smattering of roll-up, recap announcements, a whole bunch of stuff because we were off most of July, so a lot of good catch-up stuff. And some really interesting security stuff too, Mr. Kidda.
Nice. Also a smattering. Going to be talking about usually, Doug, we don't talk about licensing, but today I think there is something interesting to talk about from a licensing perspective around the Power Platform. Yes, sir. To me, it's Power Platform today. It's a little bit of Flow, Power Apps, and Power BI.
Well, we certainly covered Power BI enough last week, if we're running long, I will have to for once be the guy who exits green screen left, and gets out of here. But again, O365 user group next Monday, August 5th, I believe. September's up there right now, but it's kind of on a rotator. So go check out if you're in Minnesota and you want to go to the 365 user group. Go check that out. Registration is still open. You can get in, and there's a lot of interesting topics going on. All right, so let's put the big one on the board first. A few end of life things. This one's not a big one, but it's an important one. We're stopping all support across our product portfolio for TLS 1.0 and 1.1. MCAS made their official announcement. What this means is you have to have your agents updated, and you can't be communicating with wet napkin quality encryption standards against our services. I don't know what else to say.
Wet napkin.
Well, that's about the encryption standard, TLS 1.0. I mean, comparative to compute and where we're at and everything else. I mean, if you want to go read on it or you want to dispute that, you should still be using 1.0. But basically, I thought it was kind of funny because if you cut over very briefly, it says of the agents, versions older than 0.11.126. You can cut back. Okay, so you get the idea. Yeah, if you've been staying somewhat current, so what do you need to do? You need to make sure that everybody's at TLS 1.2. Transport layer security is an important thing. Go keep yourself cryptographically safe and move on. Okay, so there's that. The next one, this is the big one. Skype for Business Online, the service component of Office 365, is retired as of July 31st, 2021. Means it will no longer accept connections. So what are your options? Move to Teams, right? Or continue Skype for Business Server, which is not end of life.
Yep. So I mean, this is 2 years. You got 2
years, and we've been migrating the services over from it for the last since Teams shipped, right? There's the coalescence roadmap and the convergence roadmap shut down. As you know, in December of last year, they announced their final cutover of features and how they were mapping it over and what they were or were not doing. So if you have a nuanced thing, but I think you've seen the sophistication and richness of Skype Online. So hopefully you're there. If not, there's 2 years to get there. So please understand and operationalize around that. And there's islands mode and all the different things. So I referenced the blogs on the conversion stuff and the whole programs and everything else. There are plenty of workshops and everything to help get you ready for this. We do understand that it's a user adoption change. I had a customer in this week that's concerned that, Skype was only for IM and Teams has more. So they were not aware of how they could use meeting policies to control the UI a little bit and ease it in. Now, again, you can't un-Teams Teams, so the team will be there. But you can simplify the navigation for people and control what's there. So there's a lot of great things that are within that ecosystem. So start planning your transition. If you need help, reach out to the partner ecosystem or to Microsoft, and we will lean in with you. There'll be lots of workshops coming this year. And again, 2021, July 31st.
Yeah, the clock is ticking, 2 years.
Yeah, well, we have other compelling dates, right? Obviously, we're on the countdown till next year when Win 7 and certain versions of Office, and we've been talking, hey, and we've even gone through lots of operational exercises around how to do that, and there'll be more of that stuff coming. All right, so on to our next thing. So this is the M365 Roundup for the month. We talked about the FIDO thing last week. Enough said on that. Go do that. However, I did like that that we had the remediation of vulnerabilities, the Microsoft Threat and Vulnerability Management stuff that we announced in GA as part of the Defender ATP, including TVM. So if you are an entitled customer to Defender ATP, you should really lean in and pay attention to this because it allows a risk prioritization of how you're going to do remediation. So I mean, I can't stress strongly enough how important the ability to do focused work around protection is, right? Alignment with risk and threat. Now, yes, ideally in a perfect universe, we want every single thing patched, every single thing up to date, all is perfect harmony, right? But the reality is you can't get to some things. So you have to prioritize things around threats. And so TVM is a risk-based vulnerability management approach. And so please embrace this and spend a little time on it. If you have the entitlement, it's worth your time and efforts.
Nice.
All right. So then obviously Teams got some uplifts, and we talked about a couple of those things, the prioritization stuff, right? And the ability to also do announcements and have those announcements go to multiple channels. So that got announced on top of it. But one thing I missed, and I called it out as a separate one a little bit, so I'll go over there, is did you catch the QuickPoll's Microsoft Forms integration to Outlook at all?
No, I have not.
I'm going to dig on this in a separate forums post. So I linked over to the real one on top of that. Yammer has a cool thing about making answers more discoverable. So if you're out there and like this is the answer to a common issue, there's some promotions capabilities on top of that. Nice. Microsoft To Do for shared lists got collaborative assignment.
Yes.
So I knew you were going to like that one because you're like me, you're a planner / to-do person. Yep. For on top of it. We had the public preview of desktop analytics that I covered last week, which I've covered once before. I'm going to hammer it again. Go invest in this. We will be doing workshops around the MTC heading into the fall. But if you're somewhere else, you don't have to wait. You can get out there and start paying attention to the desktop analytics components right now because it allows you to keep Windows current, which is super important on top of it. And then obviously there was the virtualization announcements that were announced around Office performance from our FX Logics acquisition last year. So there's interesting things on top of that. All right, so I'm kind of shotgunning around a little bit, but these things are important on top of it. So we had the Teams Roundup for things. The priority notifications. Now, there's one thing that I did not know about priority notifications. You may receive them, but there's certain kinds of messages that actually there is a license delta. Back to we don't like to talk about license much, but if it impacts a feature's experiential feature or is transformative, you should read this because if you're E3, E5, you can do that heck you want, right? Essentially for this particular feature, like all those things. But for frontline workers, there's a cap on certain kinds of things, the volume they can initiate them per month.
Which makes sense.
Sure, but you just need to know it. And so go check out the nuance of that. So I think it, by the way, unlikely anyone would hit those thresholds based on my gut understanding of how people are using it. But also, did you know Atlas Mention is in there?
I saw that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that because not everybody likes to hit the @ key when they start typing someone's name. They're like, well, I'd like to please involve, capital T Todd, right, Kidda, and can't you just figure out why do I have to go hit the @ key, right? And so
I'm @ key muscle memory, right? I've been using Twitter for long enough, but
generationally though, a lot of other people are not. And
so I get it. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, from a generational accessibility, this is really cool. Channel moderation, which I don't know. I mean, I get it. Channel moderation is here. If you need that capability, that level of governance and control, go check it out. I mean, the goal behind Teams is dynamic collaboration, and everybody keeps wanting to put up rules and safeguards, and I get it, because you're like, well, what if my employees do bad things, right? Or what if I want to keep the thing focused and I don't want to let it get all, out of control? Be careful about that, because the goal is viral collaboration. And I'm not saying this doesn't have a place. I'm saying, like many things, I always say this is one of those examples, if you like to cook, where this is like a ghost pepper and truffle oil, use sparingly.
Yeah, I like it.
Right? Don't put this everywhere. You will regret it. In my opinion, which is worth what you paid for. Okay, Teams live events and meetings, which we've had captioning in live events for a while in preview. Now it's over in meetings, so that's why it's in previous. Now it's everywhere, so all your meetings can have captioning turned on for them for live. Remember, recordings will be captioned and put up into stream. Right, so you'll have that component, but you can basically pick up to 6 languages. And if you're watching this show, or if you follow us on Twitter, there's a humorous tweet out last week where I was doing I forget what it was, but it turned into Office/Friday.
That's our Halloween episode.
The Halloween episode. Halloween doesn't fall in a day, but I think we're going to pre-record from Halloween. And maybe I'll have my traditional Halloween costume, which is Calvacado, the cow.
That's a special day for you, right, Doug?
It is, yes. That's my birthday. So I maybe Calvacado will make an appearance on Flash Friday. We'll see. However, and then it'll be Office/Friday. All right. So analytics and reports got an uplift on top of it. Teams room experience, we chatted about that one on top of it. One thing that I had almost missed, and another call out to the Skype retirement date in case you missed it, that there is now a network planner preview that launched on July 1 for people to understand in the Teams Admin Center to do network modeling. Now, we've had these kind of tools for Skype and other things. So I have not checked this out. So I'd be very curious as to a community perspective. So if you've reviewed this and you like it or you don't like it, hit us up on Twitter and let me know. I'm going to try and make time in the next week or two to dig in on this one, because I love network assessment tools, right? I like being able to proactively communicate to my network team. I would like to do this 2 or 4 for our users and to you, right? And I want to model out those things. And historically, the Skype one was pretty robust. And so I'm curious to see how this next generation of the network admin and planning tools shakes out.
Right on.
Yeah. Some first line worker stuff for time clock, which is pretty cool. And then for my Gov customers, a little bit of Office/Friday love for you. The feature update for external access for it, which should be completed by end of 2019 for GCC High and DoD. Oh, wow. Broadcast video for it is became available in GCC on July 26th, so for live events. And then the unified presence capability announcements in here, and then the one-on-one federated chat between Skype for business users. And so the Gov Community Cloud moves forward. DoD gets some stuff as well. So tune into our friends in Reston, Virginia for more details on that, because they're the experts on the Gov Cloud, right? Dave McDonald, Ed, and all that gang that's out there. But we try and keep you updated where we can for our Gov followers who always complain to me first person that I don't ever do any Gov announcements. So I've at least kicked that can down the road for a week.
Reset the clock. All right.
I'm trying. What can I do? It's like days since incident. It's back to 0, right? So so I can go ahead and go where I want on top of that. All right. So a couple more from me, and I'll be turning over to you. Azure AD Application Proxy support for SAML is GA. Now, if you are not an Azure, let's go full screen on this one for a minute. If you are not an Azure AD Application Proxy, if we can cut over, maybe, and we'll see. The diagram, I'll just kind of zoom in on here. So SAML support for the application proxy essentially means that right now you could take your application and you could do a SAML affiliation to it directly against Azure Active Directory. But that would require you to sort of repointer where your application is getting its SAML. And what we've essentially does, if you remember on the old school for the Azure Application Proxy, which is a cloud-based application reverse proxy, right? If you don't know what it is, go check it out. It allows you to publish your on-prem applications, old school web applications, and publish them up. Microsoft then lets people hit our cloud-based proxy. We do MFA, audit logging, all the rest of the stuff, and then we backhaul that connection down to a proxy agent that's on your network, right? And so it works in some ways like the data management gateway does, presenting data to the Power BI service, but we're presenting the native web applications to the users with your business rules and conditional access rules applied. So MFA, whatever. Now, once you have access to that application, the app's presented, you're going, but it's great, but it only supports applications that support integrated Windows authentication, right? Because you can authorize the host for Kerberos constrained delegation for the old school and you. That basically means this host is allowed to issue a curb ticket to say Todd is Todd. Yep. So that proxy can, then you can get single sign onto the application and the user doesn't have to sign in again. Well, what if your application was SAML enabled? And what if that SAML assertion came from somewhere else? So this essentially allows you to have that SAML generation request sent back, right, from AAD via the application proxy, and which is previously something you did not have that capability for. So if you had an application that had moved to modern authentication, you had to have a separate architecture for supporting that, essentially a native. You couldn't use the app proxy. Right, and that meant you would had to have exposed that application directly to the internet as opposed to safeguarding it behind the geo-resiliency, low latency global network access, and security features of the app proxy service. And so those are important feature capabilities, and now you can have that with SAML-based applications. So I think this is a huge announcement of feature GA. Greg Kostick and I have been fans out of Denver of this service since its inception. We think it's just an amazing part of your Azure AD entitlement, so go check it out.
Nice, love it.
Okay, so we're going to return from security back over into forms. Ooh. Now, we don't often cover forms as a standalone topic, but we kind of weave it in. But they released their June-July roundup, and there was some interesting stuff in there. First, I don't know if you knew branching came into forms.
Yes, this has become a really robust product in the last
It's a real thing. And I don't mean to seem surprised by that. I know that, but we got to start covering it more as it goes through stuff. Because as soon as they started putting back in the quizzes and almost restoring that, remember Office Mixer? I was a huge fan of Mixer, and so Mixer-like functionality. If you we're not around that stuff. That's sort of we announced, hey, that's going to come back in some form and flavor. Well, here it is. So you're getting branching built into it, theme recommendations to make it look nice from a UI standpoint, and then my personal favorite, which is the QuickPoll integration. So you know how like you want to say where should we go or do some kind of poll activity inside of a meeting. Well, now you can do a quiz directly inside of Office.com. And so when you're composing your email, this is the book a room portion, which is equally important, but I was more interested in the quick poll and quiz functionality. They're both there in the animated video. So like you can now book rooms and create those components. It is an Outlook add-on in order to have that functionality built in. So it's one of the web add-on components. So you have admin control and you'd have to allow that if you're curating and governing that. But the quick polls functionality is pretty slick. So now you can create a quiz directly from within Office, directly from within Outlook, and you get this quick poll functionality on top of it. So I like that a lot.
I mean, this has become my go-to for collecting any kind of information from any group more than just a few people. It's awesome.
It's great.
Check it out. I think for you, I mean, like same with you, it's kind of been a surprise hit for me.
Yeah. But in hindsight, I'm not surprised because of how much people love Mixer.
Yep.
Right. I mean, Mixer has huge fan base, and now that's far more broadly available. It's not locked into the education enclave, right? So very good stuff. Okay, so let's cut to full screen on this one if we can. And this one is an announcement that Office 365 user activity-based expiration policies for Office 365 groups is now in private preview. And the reason I'm having you cut over to the screen is essentially to say, hey, if someone edits a SharePoint document or user does something, sends a group email in Outlook, or visits a Teams channel if there's activity, then essentially you will get those heads up around that deletion activity, and there's also a full audit event on top of it. All right, so cut back. What are we essentially saying? We're going to combine the signal intelligence around activity from any of those things, and if you activate this functionality, which is currently in private preview, which means if you try and see it, you won't, but they've announced it. Right? And so I would imagine if you were out on user voice, you probably got an invite to the private preview. When this goes to public preview, I think you should pay attention. Now, again, I have a lot of my customers who are doing Mind the Gap, our favorite thing. The reason the Flash Friday logo looks a little bit like that is because there's a GUI, there's an API, and there's a power something. In this particular case, this is a GUI-driven functionality, right? Or an admin-driven functionality. You're going to go configure this. But if your business rules are different, remember, there's still the API. But I like this. I like this a lot. I would like to say you could combine some very interesting, like some graph queries and reports to draw conclusions around which things this should be applied to, and then stuff this out and really get the activity telemetry around it. Because if they haven't looked or viewed or touched a document, participated in a chat, or had an email thread, that thing is probably
dead. Yeah.
And therefore, we should move it to archive, vault the things we care about. See, you thought I was going to say delete it. It's not what I said. We're going to run your business rules against it, right? It's not what I said. We're going to run the business rules against it, right? So that maybe it has regulatory requirements, but at that point in time, we know it should no longer be staining the user environment, and we have a potential to delete it based on regulatory requirements and business rules. All right, I got one left, and I know I was the long talker today, so I apologize for that, but this is an important one. So cut over to this full screen for a brief moment. We are changing the client licensing and activation service in a really good way. And I want to component says, hey, you're going to see that it'll go out to a semi-annual channel and targeted release. So it's going to take a while for this to get out because it's impacting the Office clients themselves, the Office 365 clients themselves. So users will continue to sign in to activate Office on their device. When single sign-on is enabled, boom, you're in. Users can sign in to activate Office on 5, 5, and 5. That doesn't change. But here's the interesting changes to it. Users can install Office on a new device without being prompted to deactivate Office on another device. When you hit the limit, instead of being prompted, the user will be automatically signed out on the one that's oldest that fell off the back of the turnip truck. Okay? Okay, so cut back. This was a needed change. Users are horrible about going into the Office portal and releasing their licenses and doing this. So we had all this sort of stuff. If you haven't used it in a while, it's simply going to deactivate. And I don't know about some of you, especially if you're in IT, you may have more than 5 devices you've registered in the last couple of years. As you try new equipment when it comes in, oh, you quick sign into it, or like we sign into one of the machines backstage and it activates.
All the time.
But I'm never really on more than 5 within a window.
Totally.
Like I'm not on more than 5 concurrently. I don't have 5 machines at my desk where I'm actively typing on them all as me. Right? And so this basically activates a sanity policy. Say, hey, you can go activate yourself on all sorts of them, but the oldest one's going to fall off the back. I can't tell you the number of scenarios this mitigates for my customers. It's this quiet post that means so much to a lot of IT admins out there. Yep. So please pay attention. We did listen. We did make a really good change. Also, there's like the error around device deactivation and activation reporting. You didn't see some of the audit events, so they're cleaning all that stuff up. And so, again, if you're in semi-annual channel, it's going to take a while for this to get you, right? But from a long-term strategy standpoint, this problem is now in the rearview mirror, and that is the end of the curated news from my side.
All right, rock and roll. So, all right. So for me this week, Doug, you mentioned the SharePoint user group coming up, or the Office 365 user group rather, in Minneapolis coming up. We're actually kicking off a new user group in St. Louis. We're simply referring to it as the St. Louis Microsoft AI user group. I'm going to be starting that with Charles Webb over at one of our great partners. And our first session is going to be coming up. And if the word AI is intimidating to you, I know a lot of like analysts and kind of end user folks are watching this. Don't be. We're really trying to figure out where and how to focus this. So we're going to be covering like the Microsoft AI story all up across. If you're a data scientist or an analyst or even kind of a manager, you're going to get something out of this session. So I'd encourage you to come over to the Microsoft office on the 15th and check it out. All right. So this one, Doug, and I think just given the time, we maybe kind of let this one breathe for a few minutes, and maybe I'll save some of my topics for next week. Okay. But the new licensing options for Power Apps and Flow. So previously, just to kind of recap, we used to have this P1, P2 capability, which basically a user-enabled license that gave you a certain capacity. So for Flow, is like how many runs did you get every month? And it was a monthly per user per month charge, right? So we still have those types of options available. We're not calling them P1, P2 anymore, but we're also making it easier to get into these scenarios where you want to really start to bring in specific business cases. I want to tackle a specific scenario and not necessarily enable, swaths of end users to start building out. So, for example, on the Power Apps plan, there's now a per app plan. So this is based on business scenarios, and it's going to be priced on a app month basis as opposed to a user month basis. So we still have that per user plan, right? But I think this is offering some more flexibility than we had before to allow people to start to adopt flow in their environment.
There would be a certain point where the scale would tip in your favor,
Yep.
but you don't have to dive all the way into the deep end of the pool. You can now wade in with your initial applications.
That's right. So this is interesting. I think, it's a pretty big change. So I'm sure we're going to be listening to feedback and hearing how this is going to be useful in people's environments. But this is also based on how people have been leveraging the Power Platform. So I think this is probably going to be a welcome change for a lot of people and giving you that flexibility to kind of get in and start to adopt. The other thing that I thought was really cool is this idea of PowerApps portals, where you're bringing in folks from outside your organization, right? And those folks could be anonymous. They could be authenticating with a LinkedIn account, right? But we're allowing you to now acquire licensure to those external users. And you can see we're pricing that differently, whether the user is authenticated with one of those authentication providers that I mentioned, or they're anonymous even. So a lot of times you're going to have those scenarios, and we need to be able to kind of capture those users from a licensure perspective officially. So now we're kind of offering that up. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah. And then from a flow perspective, same kind of idea, per user per month, but also per business process. So this enables, again, more teams to be able to build flows per a business process scenario and focus more on the scenario rather than the user. So again, I think as you go through an adoption curve inside your organization, it's going to be really figuring out what makes the most sense for you, especially, and that's probably maybe will change over time as adoption increases, hopefully. So do you have any more thoughts on that one, Doug?
Go check it out. The Power Portal stuff is in there. Go read it, absorb it. There'll be a lot more discussions, and reach out to your Microsoft teams or to partners if you have any questions on it.
And there was a scenario, or there was a session at Inspire that I encourage you to watch as well to kind of dive deeper into that. So it's a pretty robust change. I would definitely check it out. All right. So this is more of just an FYI. There is going to be a Flow conference coming up on September the 10th online. So go register for that. That's going to be cool. 9 hours of content.
That was crazy popular last year. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
They were, I don't know, like, it's not they weren't ready technically. They were just stunned, I think, by the popularity.
Well, I mean, this is cool too, because I find that, I mean, the Power Platform as a whole is super powerful when you start to weave these, capture, automate, and measure capabilities of all the different capabilities. But we have our Flow geeks and our Power BI geeks, and this is for our Flow geeks to this day. So I think it's going to be a great day. And just check it out. It's free. It's online. What more could you ask for, right?
Awesome.
Awesome. All right, couple more. I'm going to cover my Flow things and then save some Power BI things for next week. This one, there's a couple really cool things from a Flow perspective in here that just makes designing a little more easy. Finally, we're able to say, copy a action and then paste it inside of either that flow or another flow altogether.
Or another flow. That was the one that caught me. I was like, eh. And then it was like, oh, that's nice.
What's great here too, though, is that there's two nuances to this I think that are super useful. Well, number one, you already mentioned kind of pasting across flows. But number two, you're able to copy an entire scope. So a lot of people haven't maybe seen the scope action, but all of the scope action is what it sounds like. It's a scope. So it enables you to group activities together that you can either collapse or move around now. So I'm able to take an entire scope and copy that across to another flow. Now, what's really cool here, check out number 3, is that all this is doing behind the scenes is copying some text.
Yeah, if we cut to full on this one.
Yeah. So let me I'm going to copy this whole thing out and open up Notepad and paste that in. This is just I'll do a word wrap. This is just a JSON document, yeah, that contains all the information about the configuration of your flow. So you're able to take this and copy this across. The other thing this allows you to do, since it's just text, is you could keep your own snippets library in your OneNote or in your Notepad or even in GitHub.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if you have some things that you commonly need to reuse, you just go and copy that text. So I think
the
that's
Git thing, and then you could say, hey, this is what this component is, and you could have like submissions and check-ins and do all of your, hey, look at that, DevOps.
Well, speaking of DevOps, I think I have something up here on that. So we have a couple, I'll get to that in a second. So we have a couple new things from just an enhanced user experience perspective. I've loved what we've done with the new flow experience. We made it a lot easier to kind of create a new flow. Because if you go back a year or so, when you create a new flow, you're kind of in this blank canvas. If you haven't been in there before, you're like, what do I do? Now we're giving you more prescriptive options, recipe-based type things to run a scheduled flow or to run a button flow. So in this case, it's like, I want to run this flow, on this schedule, and it's going to end up creating a timer trigger. But I don't really have to think about that when I'm creating a new flow and maybe I'm a new flow user. We've enhanced the flow details page, as well as the new run experience where we're able to kind of show you what connectors that it's using, just making that a little smoother.
Nice.
So from a flow, I know, Doug, you have a hard stop. I'm going to finish up this post and then we'll wrap the show.
Yeah, you can keep going. I'm going to disconnect. Everybody have a great weekend. Todd will see you out. I'm going to exit to green screen left. So.
All right. Have a good weekend, sir.
All right.
All right. So some really cool updates for Flow in July. So from a SharePoint perspective, we're now enabling you to work with folders in a couple different ways. So I can create folders, that's cool, but I can also extract a zip file into a folder. So if I'm extracting out a zip file from an email, or I'm triggering based off a zip file that lands in Azure Blob Storage or wherever, I can now extract the zip contents into a folder inside of SharePoint, which is cool. I can work with check-in, check-out, and I can even work with permissions now. So if I want to have a flow to go in and say, all right, based on a set of rules that I maintain wherever, I can actually go and set up permissions on a new item inside of SharePoint. So that folder-based flow that I talked about also goes over to modern document set. So I can say trigger a flow every time a document is changed in a folder or a document set, which I think is pretty cool. Now, this references back the DevOps capability that we talked about. I've spent a lot of time over the past year or two talking to people about how do you do ALM around the Power Platform, Flow, Power Apps, those kinds of things. Well, we've released a public preview of the Power Apps and Flow build tools that I can now officially move those into Azure DevOps. So this is legit ALM for end user based and developed applications with using the same DevOps tools that developers are using to deploy to Azure or Linux or Windows or other environments. So this is a really, I think, powerful statement that we're making and saying, hey, this is not just a toy. It's not just something that's designed to sit under someone's desk. This is something that we really want to enable actual business process and IT-based process around these applications so that we're enabling the end users with the power of these tools, but we're also putting IT governance around it and pushing those through to environments with proper deployment techniques. So I'm pretty excited about that. You can dig into the blog posts and the tools on that. We're also enabling guest users to participate in approvals, which is really cool. So this has to do with Azure AD B2B, pulling in guest users and then enabling them to participate in the approval process. There are some limitations because one of the big things is you don't want to allow an external user to iterate or to enumerate your directory. So some of those things are just turned off. For example, if they're typing in a user in the user picker, they're going to have to know that person's email rather than get autocomplete like you would internally. So check out those limitations and those capabilities there, and I think that's pretty cool. So this one is a big one from a usability perspective. One of the biggest pains that I've had in Flow for a long time is a lot of times when I'm creating a flow for the first time, I'm creating a new flow, I'm not necessarily going to focus on giving all the best names right out of the gate, and those kinds of things. I'm going to try some things, I'm going to iterate, and then I'm going to want to go back and clean it up and give things a nice name. So we're now able to rename downstream actions when there's a dependency on that. So for example, if I have a trigger and it's based on a SharePoint document library, a library or a document getting created in that library, and I have a bunch of things that rely on that downstream, I can now rename that trigger up top and everything flows down to the bottom, which is great. So a couple new connectors this week. We got some blockchain, we got some live tiles bots, some project stuff, and some serverless 360. So go out and check that out. I'm going to save the Power BI stuff for next week because we're already a few minutes over. Along with Doug, I'm going to wish you guys a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday. Take care, everybody.